They say the best stories are the ones you don't want to finish, the type of stories you can get lost in. My name is NIKMOE, and this is God of War, and somehow Sony has done it again. They've created a world full of interesting characters and places, and I don't want to put the game down. And though this is technically the 5th game in the main series of God of War titles, God of War 2018 is a very different game from its predecessors. Gone are the overarching themes of vengeance and rage from previous games, and in their place are feelings of guilt, purpose, and redemption. If you've seen or played this game, you know that the combat is the star of the show here. Tearing through enemies as Kratos with a Leviathan axe is an absolute joy. There's armor to craft and upgrade, and there are Zelda-like puzzles scattered all about the game's world for you to solve. For a game so dense with satisfying gameplay, you'd think that the story could take a back seat. But that's what surprised me the most about God of War. The story is front and center here, and the ways in which the story is presented to you is nothing short of groundbreaking. Sony's first-party studios have been churning out these epic single-player games for years now, but with God of War, the mechanics of storytelling have never been more impressive. And so today, I want to show you how Sony Santa Monica leverages 3 different types of storytelling mechanics to create a memorable story in God of War. And fear not, there will be no major story spoilers in this video. The game is just too new, and everyone deserves to experience this game without being spoiled. Okay, before we jump into the action, you may be wondering, what is a story mechanic? Well, to me, a story mechanic is any part of a game that helps tell the story but isn't direct gameplay. In other words, story mechanics help progress the plot of the game, but can be completely ignored if the player chooses to. For example, in Tomb Raider, we have collectibles that Lara can pick up, and they teach us about the game world. That's a story mechanic. And in Majora's Mask, we have NPCs who don't add anything to the game other than small pieces of the story. Again, a story mechanic and one that can be completely ignored by the player. Okay, that's enough introduction. Back to Kratos. At the beginning of God of War, we learn that Kratos and his son, Atreus, must embark on a grueling journey. We soon realize that we aren't just here for the highlights. The player is with Kratos for literally every step of the journey. From the moment Kratos leaves his home until the journey is long over, we never lose sight of our protagonist, which brings us to our first storytelling mechanic, God of War's brilliant continuous camera system. God of War is presented to the player with no interruptions. Gameplay and cutscenes flow seamlessly from one to the other, and the camera moves naturally through these scenes. The camera never cuts away. There are no loading screens. It's all presented as one continuous shot. At first, this seemed like a gimmick. After all, when Kratos takes his time crawling down a tight corridor, it's usually a dead giveaway that the game is loading something in the background. And that might be true, but the effect is convincing. Because there are no loading screens, you're part of every step of the journey. This means that you experience the passage of time at the same rate that Kratos does. If Kratos needs to cross a large body of water, you will experience every stroke of the oar. And if Kratos needs to journey up a mountain, you will witness every obstacle along the way. It's this commitment to keeping the camera on Kratos that gives us an intimate connection to the story unfolding around us. On his journey, Kratos is not alone. His son, Atreus, accompanies him, and a few hours into the game, a third member is added to the party with Mimir. So unlike much of the previous God of War games, in this title, Kratos is actually part of a group taking a journey together. And this brings us to our second story mechanic, companion characters. Now, I need to get something out of the way. Having a companion character move the story along is really nothing new. Think back to Booker and Elizabeth in BioShock Infinite, or Nathan Drake and Elena in the original Uncharted, or Ellie and Joel in The Last of Us. However, God of War uses the companion characters in ways we've just not seen before. As I just mentioned, we have not one but 2 companions for Kratos to communicate with, Atreus and Mimir, and they each add something different to the story. Mimir is old and wise, but, minor spoiler alert, he spends the entire game as a disembodied head. He is both all-knowing and useless at the exact same time. Meanwhile, Atreus is young and capable, but naive and foolish. He rushes carelessly into battle and lacks patience. Between these two opposite ends of the personality spectrum, we have Kratos, right down the middle, who doesn't care for Mimir's ramblings, nor does he have the patience for Atreus' childish antics. Kratos only cares about completing the journey, and in this party of three, he serves as the voice of logic and reason in between these opposing personalities of Mimir and Atreus. It's a perfectly balanced cast. Each member adds something different to the story, and the game would feel much more empty and lifeless if we only had Kratos and his stoic silence on this journey. Speaking of Mimir, we need to discuss how God of War handles its lore. You see, there's actually an insane amount of world building and lore stuffed into this game, but it never feels overwhelming. That's thanks to the third storytelling mechanic, Mimir's Tales. As I mentioned before, Mimir is old and wise, and so he's able to tell Kratos and Atreus all about the world around them. However, instead of having Mimir spend 2 hours giving us a detailed overview of Norse mythology, the game smartly breaks out all of his information into short stories, or tales. The best part is these tales are actually rewards. Along your journey, Kratos and Atreus will discover altars that depict the stories of the Norse gods. Every time an altar is discovered, our party will share a few words, and then Mimir promises Atreus that he will tell him a bit more about the altar just a little later. Sure enough, once our party has some downtime, say in a boat crossing a large body of water, Atreus will ask Mimir to tell him the story they saw in the altar, and Mimir does so. It seems simple, but Mimir's Tales are one of the strongest storytelling tools in the game, and here's why. First, by saving these stories for downtime on the boat keeps the game interesting even when Kratos is just paddling a boat. 2, by putting these tales on the boat instead of during hectic combat, we can actually pay attention to what Mimir is saying with no distractions. In fact, if you need to dock the boat, Mimir will actually tell Atreus that he has to pause the story because he knows Kratos is about to start swinging the axe. It's a smart way to make these tales fit into the gameplay around them, and clearly Sony knows how well this system works. I've highlighted a similar system before in Naughty Dog's games, like Uncharted Lost Legacy. Shameless plug. You see, this is why Mimir's Tales are so critical to God of War's storytelling. They don't stop us from playing. So many games have artifacts and audio logs that force you to pause the action in order to absorb all of the writing put into the game. That's not the case here. Mimir's Tales are smartly integrated within the larger design of the game, and it makes the lore and world of God of War so much more engaging. This is God of War. It's a series we thought we all knew, and yet in its most recent title has been reinvented. The combat and gameplay have been refined, but it's the attention to storytelling that sets this game apart from its predecessors. Through the use of key storytelling mechanics, God of War is able to craft a story so engaging, I didn't want it to end. I believe that God of War has been reborn for a new generation of players, and I cannot wait to see where Kratos heads next. Thank you all so much for watching. It feels so good to be back on YouTube, and if you're new to the channel, please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos when they drop. If there's a game you think I would enjoy playing, please tell me about it in the comments below. Once again, my name is NIKMOE, reminding you to find your game.